I'm ready.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the COVID Conversations. This is a conversation, and hopefully you can't hear the men working on my porch in the background too much, with some people that I hold near and dear to me, who I have known for sometimes a very long time and sometimes not long enough. This guy on my left, on my right, I have known for a number of years. I met through some very interesting circumstances, usually by way of a knee ride or a choke doing some jiu-jitsu, and then it came to the point where he was the one that started to mentor me, so we had a little bit of a role reversal, but more about that to come. Mr. Matthew Swift, always a pleasure. How are you, sir?
I'm very well.
Thank
you for having me on.
Oh, mate, we took a couple of juggles, but we got there, didn't we?
We did.
Mate, I think I want to hear a lot of what you have to say. I had to basically stop our conversation and start the interview because we were probably going more into the interview. But let's start it. Barbecue intro. Water. It's not dark yet, so no alcohol. G'day, mate. My name's Kyl. What's your name, mate? What do you do?
Oh, that's pardon me. That's always a difficult question for me. I think
it is.
I do stammer over it.
What do you do at the moment?
What I do at the moment, I think the answer I give most commonly is that I work for HQ. I work for CrossFit.com.
Mm-hmm.
Then people usually ask me if I'm a trainer. I say, well, I am a trainer, but at the moment what I'm doing is writing content. I'm a content writer. I put together course material and work in that area. I sometimes describe myself as a retired gym owner. So roll the clock back, and for the previous 13 years, I would have said I own a CrossFit gym, and that would have sparked a conversation about CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly these days, I just say I'm a dad and a husband. So I try to put that in the forefront of my explanation of who I am. So happily married for 28 years this year.
Jesus. And
I got two amazing kids that are now 26 and 23.
Mm. So now, you've let's digress a little bit. Let's go back, I don't know, maybe about 15 odd years or so. So CrossFit, fitness, being healthy, being active has always, I would assume, been a big part of your life. How does one start to get involved in that sort of? Was it just a thing? You always played sports as a kid? It was just a natural progression? Was it a light bulb moment? What was it?
No, it's pure accident for me. So roll the clock back, I was an IT manager. So I was an IT guy. I used to describe myself as the vet that hated animals. So I got into IT.
That's good.
Literally because I knew I had to go to university. I had family pressure to go to university, and which is a good thing. And I didn't know what to do. And at the time, this is way, way before IT was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Computer science had just sort of popped up as a discipline at University of Queensland, and I literally picked the job that I thought had the most opportunity and the most money, and found myself doing a computer science degree, which was just the wrong thing for me to be doing. And then once I'd started, I was like, well, I've started, so I might as well keep going. And I'm pretty stubborn, so I didn't want to walk away from anything. And so then I graduated. And then it was sort of the same conversation. Well, I've done the degree. I might as well just get a job while I work out what I'm doing. And then I just kept on doing that. And I ended up doing that for 18 years.
Mm.
So I had quite an extended IT career. Now, to answer your question, I'd always been involved in sports. Sport had always been a big part of what I'd done.
Yeah.
Grew up in Bundaberg, which is known for its sporting teams and sporting drive.
Bundy.
You're either a sports person or a drunk. As you would know, growing up in Maryborough, which is the poorer cousins.
It is still the case.
So yeah, we in my growing up, we were all, myself and my friends were always like, what's the next sport we're playing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
All through my IT career, I'd do different things. I'd always done martial arts type stuff, which is an area that we have shared interests in. And I'd done a lot of triathlon, a lot of different things, and just basically a whole lot of things that I wasn't particularly good at, but really enjoyed doing. And what always appealed to me was being that sort of everyman, being the generalist that could do everything. So I was never good at anything, but I could do most things okay.
Yeah.
And so I went through phases. Whatever I was doing at the time, I would end up coaching people in. So if I was doing triathlon, I would be dragging people down the pool at lunchtime and trying to get them doing a triathlon. If I was doing, I started doing jiu-jitsu, I started gathering people from work and we'd roll and do jiu-jitsu at lunchtime. If it was karate, I'd be dragging people to karate. If it was touch footy, I'd be trying to teach them how to play touch footy better. So that was like a constant theme. And so when I decided to change careers, it was really quite by accident. So I was going back to university and I did my personal training qualification just as like this temporary job. I decided to go and be a pool lifeguard because I'd been in surf clubs and I was swimming at the time. So that seemed like an easy job to do. I didn't have to really think much and I could get to talk to a lot of people. And at the same time, I was going to become a personal trainer. So I did the personal training thing, the ridiculous course that was just taught you nothing, and then all of a sudden you pressed on a personal trainer.
What year was that? What year was that?
So that must have been around 2003 or 4.
So that was back when having a PT, if you said you had a PT, that was kind of a big deal, wasn't it?
That was a big deal back then.
That was a little niche market now.
Yeah.
It's very commonplace now.
Yeah, this was before. This was in the days where you would argue that the PT actually looked like a PT. Client looked like a client, and then what happened about 3 years later is you couldn't really tell the difference between the client and the PT. So I'm going to stand by that it was an honourable profession choice those days, but it was just to basically make some money while I was at uni. So I was thinking, these are both really flexible things that I could do. I'd be my pool lifeguard, I'd do PT, and I'd go back to uni. I go back to uni, and I was just shocked by how old I was. I'd done a psychology major as part of my computer science degree, and so the thought was, my wife, Wendy's a sports psychologist. I was going to go back and finish my psychology degree, and then we'd work together in the practice, and it would just be great. And I'm sitting in the lecture hall surrounded by really young 18-year-olds, and I don't know.
Were you in the front row? Were you that guy?
I was actually the antithesis of what I was the first time around. So the first time around, I never turned up to lectures. I was that shocking student that used to hate the mature age students.
Yeah.
First time around. The second time around, I was actually that mature age student,
that guy.
sitting right down the front taking notes, and that was part of it as well. It's like, oh, okay, and surrounded by really young 18-year-olds and just really wondering what I was doing there. And I did it for a couple of semesters and then decided there's got to be something other than this. So what had happened along the way was my PT clients, I'd started to group together into sort of small groups just to make it more fun. And I'd stumbled upon CrossFit because I was doing jiu-jitsu and I wanted something to improve my grip strength. And so in my mind, I was like, this CrossFit stuff is going to do it. And that's another long story. But basically, I hated CrossFit and I was the critic of it. This shit will never work.
Oh, God.
And then at the time, I was my training buddy was Gary O'Neill, very well-known Kyokushin fighter, great guy. And we were training together. And I was like, let's give it a go. And we gave it a go to prove that it didn't work. And it just destroyed us, like totally destroyed us. And we had this existential moment of like, hey, hang on, we're fit guys that have always been sporty. How come we can't do this? And we kept coming back day after day, trying different workouts and just couldn't handle any of them. So we clearly weren't fit. So
back then, pretty much no CrossFit gyms in Brisbane.
None. There was at that time, I didn't know of any of it in Australia. And then shortly after that, I found one in Sydney and one in Townsville. Mm-hmm. So, and I actually flew to Sydney to do a workout with the guy that owned it. We did a workout in the park and I flew back. So this is early days. This is like 2005, beginning of 2005. Wow. To give you some context, CrossFit Brisbane affiliated in 2006, towards the end of 2006.
Yeah.
So this is early days. And what I was doing was I was running PT at another gym. And then I was training at SASM, which was where we cross paths. And that was sort of like my space just to train. Wasn't doing any PT there. And then what very quickly happened was that my PT clients didn't get fit at all. But the people that I was trading with got significantly fitter and all of their injuries sort of got better. and coinciding with me training at SASM, I had these guys that kept on hassling me, literally like guys that trained there as well, saying like, can we join in? And so they started joining in. And then I approached Marcus, who was the owner, and ended up renting a bit of space and running some classes. And what happened in parallel was that all of this sort of super technical stuff that I thought I was, this gun PT doing, none of that shit worked. And the stuff that just throwing people into this CrossFit group and training really hard with them, that worked brilliantly. And
no 3 sets of 10 or anything like that.
No 3 sets of 10. And so it just caused me to do a retake. And so then what I did is I gathered all my PT clients and put them together as CrossFit clients. And then we started with the group. And so quite accidentally, I'd started this CrossFit class, and I wrote to Coach Glassman, Greg Glassman, and HQ, and asked if I could affiliate, because I wanted to do the right thing. And there were no courses here at that stage, and they actually let me affiliate without having done the course. And I presented a case as to why they should let me do that. And I promised to do the course as soon as I was in Australia. And before I knew it, I had this little growing CrossFit group fitness business.
Yeah.
And there was no intention to do it full time. I was still trying to work out what I was going to do with my life. And then I just didn't stop, and it kept on getting bigger and bigger. And eventually, Marcus kind of kicked me out. Didn't kick me out. The rent went up, and it was tricky. We just got busier and busier, and that obviously had an impact on him. And it was no longer possible to run as a small little thing in a side project as a gym, and we got our own space, and that was probably the greatest thing that ever happened. That in a really sort of weird way, he forced me to grow up and forced me to sort of take on the responsibility, which was a really good thing, and I'm really grateful for. And then before I knew it, we had 200 people in the building, and then next time I checked, we had 350 people in the building, and it was crazy. And we had 13 coaches, and a lot of things happened along the way. And probably the most significant was in 2007, Greg Glassman came to Australia, and he brought the courses here. And he asked me when I met him, what was my burning issue? Like, what did we need to do? And my burning issue was that we needed education. So what I said to him is, we need the courses. Like, CrossFit is growing, people want to do it, but we need to do it properly, and we need people to be educated, and we just can't come to the States. And so he went, great, you're doing it. And
okay.
And I went to he brought me to the States with Steve Willis, who had sort of asked a similar question, the commander, who had a gym in Sydney. And we did a busload of training, and we put together the Australian seminar team. And then in 2000, and I forgot my dates right, I think it was 2008, we ran the first seminar anywhere in the world that didn't have an American staff member on it, which was a really big achievement for the Australian community. And that sort of started the snowball. That's when we started to see gyms, because we could then run educational courses all the time.
It's like we were saying earlier, you kind of, like you said, accidentally just fell into that stuff. I mean, keep going. I mean, you are, what would you say? You took the show on the road. You've traveled internationally with CrossFit.com.
Yep.
You competed.
Yep.
And you did okay. Well, how did you do again? What year was that?
2015, I won the Masters in the 44, 49s. 2018, I came second. 2013, I came 8th. That was a shock.
Would you have called yourself at any time? Would you have called yourself a competitor? Like, how did competition? I'm trying to word this right. Was it something that you sort of progressed into? Did you feel it was an obligation to spread the gospel? Was it just, I'll give this a go and again see where it takes me?
I've always been really competitive, so I don't think I've ever been a good competitor at anything. But I've always been competitive in the things that I've been doing, as in, I like winning.
He doesn't.
I like trying to win. No, there's a lot of people that don't, or that it's not doesn't race. I think there is a competitive type of personality that just, and we both know from jiu-jitsu, there's those people that they don't want to tap, and those people that'll tap really early.
Yeah.
And they're just different types of people. And it doesn't matter how much you try to teach the person that doesn't want to tap that they should. it's hard for them, and it doesn't matter how much you teach the person that wants to tap early that they shouldn't, it's really hard for them as well. Like there's a lot of personality factors there. So I've always been really competitive, and I've always played a lot of competitive sport. With CrossFit, it sort of happened very organically, because when the game started 2007, it was this like, we'd always talked about CrossFit as the sport of fitness. That was more to differentiate it from a traditional gym program, and to get this concept that you can't get fit unless you're chasing better performance, and that performance is intrinsically linked as the correlate's probably the wrong word. It is the wrong word. That the degree to which your performance improves is directly associated or correlated with the degree to which your fitness has improved. And so I'd always believed in that, and it just made logical sense to me. So when the games popped up in 2007, we had this like, that just makes perfect sense. Let's actually see who is the fittest. And you should be able to measure it, which is what we'd always talked about. Fitness should be measurable, it should be observable, it should be repeatable. And so it just fit with this model so well. And so in 2009, they ran the first regionals in Australia. And at that stage, culturally within CrossFit, it was just culturally the done thing that whenever there was an event that brought the community together, the entire community turned up. That was just the way it was, because we were a fringe community. We, like when you found another CrossFit, it was like, I found another one. Like it was just such an exciting thing to be able to have a shared experience. Now today it's ubiquitous, and there's so many people. There's people doing CrossFit that isn't even CrossFit, and they don't even know what CrossFit is, but they're still identifying with CrossFit. It's just such a different world. In those days, it wasn't. It was like being the fisherman and finding the other fisherman, and everyone else hates fishing. That was the experience. So when the regionals popped up, we just turned up because it was like the fun, cool thing to do. Yep. And then as it started to formalize, it became the fun, cool thing because it was now like a real competition. And then it became the fun, cool thing because you got to compare yourself against other scores when the workouts became standardized. So there was all these little incremental steps. At no point was I thinking I'd be a competitor. Now, interestingly, I actually don't identify as a competitor at all. So even when I won the games, that was not my highest priority, as in it's not the thing that I'm about. But I do identify with taking on challenges that are outside your reach and growing by trying to be able to do them. So
well, I remember you getting ready for the 2015 games. I think I was still a member at CrossFit Brisbane, and it was, God, hours a day.
It's a lot of work. I
would see you preparing, doing all sorts of just, I'll say it, ridiculous shit. But it was just, and this is again, obviously with any competitor, people see that end result on TV or whatever on YouTube. They don't understand how many hours upon hours went into that, plus running a business, plus being a husband, plus being a father. And dare I say it, like you said, you weren't necessarily a professional athlete.
Well, the nice thing about the Masters competition is that everyone's in the same boat. So that's true. So that's one of the really nice things about, like, that's one of the things that I find so aspirational about the Masters competition is that
they've all got those variables.
They've all got shit going on. They've all got kids. They've all got businesses. They've all got work. They've all got injuries. They've all got things that are happening. So to me, it's significantly easier to identify with that competitive group than it is to identify with someone who that's the only thing in their life.
Yeah.
Because as a coach, I think that's quite unbalanced. I get it. I get when I look through the lens of world-class performance, I totally understand that what's required is a solitary dedication to that and nothing else. But for me as a dad, would I want my kids to do that? It would be no. I want you to be balanced. I want you to enjoy life. And I want you to, push yourself, but I also want you to have responsibilities. And so where I sit as a dad and as a coach is closer to Masters style competition than it ever would be to open competition.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So
no, it does.
So when I think about my time competing, it for me internally, it was more about showing my community what I thought was possible and also setting an example. And that was really important to me, like walking the walk, that this stuff does work. If you train and throw yourself at it, you can get really fit, to show that you have to work really hard. Things aren't preordained. You've actually got to really, really push. Especially the difference between 2013, I turned up and got owned because I had no idea how fast everyone was, and just was totally unprepared. And most importantly, I wasn't trying to win. In 2013, I was a passenger. I was just there to get the T-shirt, and I thought it was good enough to be in that group of top 20 men. I was like, that's cool, and that's a mistake because it certainly wasn't my best effort, and it wasn't good enough because I had potential to do better. And so the reason
one reason 2015 maybe went well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, because I realized that it was personally embarrassing for me to turn up and not be in the hunt to try to win it.
Yeah.
Like I recognized that I was protecting my ego, and I was just basically going through the motions just to show something that was good enough but not great.
Yeah.
And so there was no doubt that 2015 was a personal challenge to see whether I could put it all out there and be brave enough to actually try to win something.
Yeah.
And see where the dice rolled. And and the same in 18. Like 18 was definitely about, could I go back as the oldest in the category and try to win it? And I did try to win it. I made some mistakes and it was pretty close, but I walked away from it saying, well, 95% of that was my best effort and 5% was pretty shitty. And that 5% is probably the difference between second and first. And it's a painful experience, but
it's hard on the head.
It's still a different experience to 2013, where really I wasn't trying the way I should have been trying.
You can just you can see that difference in just that 5 years. What before we move on to the next question, I guess you are not your average lighter side of 50-year-old. Do you look back and go, like, I'm so, just to see what has evolved in CrossFit over all those years. And you were essentially, I know people have nicknamed you the godfather of CrossFit in Australia and all that stuff. You had so many affiliate owners come out that were originally members of CrossFit Brisbane. Do you look back and go, I'm glad I did something to spread something that I really believed in?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm eternally grateful for CrossFit, which is why it's there's some things that are very sort of obvious about me if you spend any time with me, and one is that I am a defender of CrossFit. I will go into bat for it. I'll defend it. That's pretty obvious. The second is that I'm eternally grateful to Greg Glassman and to CrossFit HQ, and because the impact it's had on my life has been so incredibly dramatic in every aspect. So, from a physical perspective, just the amount of physicality that I have at 50, turning 51 this year compared to when I was 30 is dramatic. Like I'm a totally different athlete in terms of what I can do and my capability. And it's still getting better. Like I'm still getting PRs on things and I'm still improving. So that in itself is something to be very grateful for. But there's so many other aspects. Like one of them is I've had the opportunity to work in a space that I genuinely love, and at no point do I have to be cynical about. So one of the things that's true with, I know people don't have a lot of insight into CrossFit HQ, but there's no smoke and mirrors. Like you don't bump into these people and only to realize that they don't actually train and they're not fit and they don't have any capacity and they don't care about health. It's the opposite. The more people you meet, the more you realize they're ultimately driven by the same things and nothing has changed. They still want people to be as fit and healthy. They fight against the cause of chronic disease. There's a drive to be as good as you can be. It's the only thing that I've found that is not fake. Like it's actually real, and martial arts touched on this to a point, certainly the full contact martial arts. There was a real, and jiu-jitsu has it to a degree. Like I think jiu-jitsu and CrossFit are very, very similar in this regard, in that, you can talk as much bullshit as you want, but on the mat, everybody knows who rules the mat.
No one cares about it anymore.
Like like you can sit on the sideline and you can analyze someone's technique, but you feel that pressure and you're like, oh shit, you're really good. like you've actually got something going on. And that's the same experience I have with CrossFit, and it's very reliable. So I don't ever have to worry about waking up one morning and thinking that the rules have all shifted. So I'm enormously grateful because it gave me a framework for thinking about the world that just I applied to everything. So it's these basic principles: mechanics first, consistency second, and intensity third. I do that in everything that I learn and do. And so I'm trying to learn the bass guitar at the moment, and it's just natural for me. Get my mechanics right first. So I'm not worried about learning songs. I'm trying to get my hands in the right position because that's the correct mechanics. I would never have done that without CrossFit. I would have just like picked it up and tried to play shit. Things like threshold training. You need to be finding this balance between intensity and technique. You need to be right on the threshold to get better. That's something that I apply in everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, I'm good at it, so now let's go faster. Let's do more. This concept of more work in less time, I do that in every aspect of what I'm doing. So these big principles that CrossFit, and probably a lot of people that do CrossFit don't even know what it is they're doing. I'd say that's the case. I'm so grateful to those philosophies that this far down the track, like in my 50s, I can't even imagine what my life would be if I just continued on the triathlete, semi-serious martial artist who was doing a desk job. Holy shit, I'd be such a different human right now. And what you just mentioned, like the number of ships that we've launched. Yeah. So I stopped counting at, I think, 38. Wow. So when there were 38 affiliates that had popped up that were directly connected to CrossFit Brisbane, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm counting this anymore. Like it's big, it's good, So what I'd said in 2007, I remember distinctly talking to Greg Glassman about what is the end goal. And I'd said the end goal for me is where CrossFit exists on every single corner, where the only option for training is CrossFit. So when people think I want to get fit, they think, oh, I've got to go to CrossFit. They don't think, I've got to go to Les Mills or I've got to go do this. Like they actually think about something that's actually going to work, and they do get fit. Yeah. And so what I watched a lot of people over the years getting disappointed in this really sort of bizarre way that CrossFit was growing. Whereas to me, it was everything I'd ever hoped for. So the fact that it's ubiquitous, the fact that it's mainstream, the fact that everyone's doing a version of it, that is great.
Isn't that what
because that's what you want. And so, I've moved into a new place, and my next door neighbor, when he asks me what I'm doing, he sees the garage we've set up. He's straight away telling me about his version of CrossFit. If I roll the clock back 13 years or 15 years, that dude would have been telling me about how his knees hurt because all he's doing is running.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So I think that's at the heart of your question is there is just so much gratitude. And I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm definitely grateful for martial arts. I'm grateful for that I've been a sporty kid. There's so many things that I'm grateful around the physical space, but they all pale in comparison to just what CrossFit has done for both my mental and physical health and continues to do.
And as a dad, it's definitely stemmed down into your kids,
Yeah, I think that's and this is probably the only thing when I talk about, what do I look back on? Do I have regrets? I do have some regrets. And one of my regrets is that I was so busy when my kids were in their formative age. And that's got less to do with CrossFit than it has with small business. I do definitely have a regret about being so entrenched in a small business when my kids were in that sort of early high school age.
Yeah.
That's regret number one. Regret number two is that with both my kids, like they do have a great base. They know what fitness is. They know how to get fit. They know how to train. They know, and it's so natural to them because I've grown up around it. But they've also been oversaturated by it. Yeah. And so they're not excited to be in the gym. They're not excited to train. And that is directly my fault because they grew up in the gym. Everything about them was the gym.
I really relate to that. It's something that Helen and I go a little bit up and down about because same thing, like our kids have been on the mat since they were babies. So it's just, especially with Lila getting older now, it's just being aware that maybe she doesn't want to be down there every single afternoon. Maybe she doesn't want to do every single trip. So it's something that I'm aware of. I mean, I always want them to, like you said, I always want them to do something, be involved somehow, or just be conscious of, it said being fit and healthy, but maybe that doesn't involve training every single afternoon anymore. No. So,
Yeah, I think I eliminated the ability for my kids to have a natural, organic love for it.
yeah.
There was almost a default. Well, it was a default, but I also think the flip side of that is that, you know, there's also just a reality about growing up. You know, like I remember doing so many things that I didn't want to do just because it was how the family made money.
Yeah.
That's also a reality, you know. So I don't beat myself up about it.
Part of being an adult.
I'm very aware that I've probably dulled this thing that I love a lot, and it would happen in any sphere. You know, if it was surfing, if it was music, it doesn't matter what it is. If you just get exposed to too much of it, you take it for granted.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. It's just remembering how good it is. Jesus, we're only on the first bloody question, Mr. Swift. All right, tell me. For those of you who are listening to this, I could talk to this guy for friggin' hours. Actually, I have talked to this guy.
I've never done a podcast under 3 hours, just to let you know. Actually, under 2 hours. I think I've done a 2 hour one.
Oh, I cancel the PTs. All right. Okay. Tell me, Mr. Swift. I think we've already got the answer, maybe, but maybe we don't. What are you passionate about?
Well, it's definitely fitness. So I think it's pretty obvious with me. It's being fit and getting people fit. Everything else is pretty much around that. I think, yeah, there's some other things around the side of that, but I don't think they're really passions anymore. Because when I think about a passion is something that you would do if you weren't getting paid for it. And it doesn't matter what pops up, you'll do it anyway. And so there were things that I used to say I was passionate about, like music and surfing, but really life's got in the way for a lot of those things, and I do give up on them if it's inconvenient. So I wouldn't call them passions. I'd like them to be passions again. Other than that,
being fit and healthy for you is a daily exercise. What would you say? It's an unconscious habit now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so much a part of me that I wouldn't even consider it as a conscious thing that I think about. And the same with helping people. Like, I'm not in an active coaching role at the moment, apart from sort of working on seminars for HQ. But I've only just sold the gym in December, so we're 4 or 5 months out. So even though I'm not actively a coach, I still find myself coaching people all the time. You know, whoever I meet, I'm trying to get them on their fitness journey. So that's an intrinsic passion. I don't know. I've got some fascinations. I'm pretty fascinated by US politics. That's something that I would never have thought was a thing for me. But as I sort of probably for the last 5 years, it started as like this curiosity, and it did develop into a genuine thing. Like, I'm very interested in actually, I tell you what sparked it was Pat Barber, who's a CrossFitter, quite a well-known CrossFitter. I was having this debate with him about rap music, saying that, you know, I would listen to rap music if they just wrote something lyrically deep. And if it's not, you know, that's the deal. And so he put me on to Hamilton.
Clearly he's never heard any NWA.
So he puts me on to Hamilton. And Hamilton is the musical about Alexander Hamilton. And I got hooked on it because not only was it an amazing soundtrack, it just introduced me to sort of early American politics. And so since that time, it's been a little bit of a side passion to understand American politics. And that's something that definitely takes up a fair bit of my mind space.
I guess you'd have a lot to read about in current times, which we will get to later.
There's heaps.
With a passion about health and fitness, I mean, without giving I don't know, maybe too much of a biblical point of view, how do you see us as a society? Are we kind of getting a little bit better at looking after ourselves, or do we go through phases, or what phase are we in now, would you say?
I think what's happened is there's many more standard deviations from the average. So another way of saying that, or a clearer way of saying that, is we have a whole lot of people that are fatter, less healthy, more chronically ill, and way down the spectrum of a lot unhealthier than they were when I roll the clock back 20 years.
Yeah.
However, we also have a whole lot more people that are sub-elite fit, that are lean, that are healthy, that are probably never going to get chronic disease, that are active, than we also had 20 years ago. Right. So I think what's happened is the bell curve has spread out.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's really this gap in the middle that seems to be unchanged. We've got the sort of the center, the peak of the bell curve hasn't gone any higher, but the base has spread out. And so if you get what I mean, there's sort of more people moving towards either extreme. So where I think it's quite difficult to reconcile is that both of those things are true. So when I walk down the street, I see a whole lot more people. Like, you can see them. You're like, you're a CrossFitter. You're a CrossFitter. You're a CrossFitter. Like, you can actually see this physicality that wasn't there. Yeah. And what's really interesting is that 20 years, or interesting to me, 20 years ago, what I would think was the fit body type would be the triathlete. So you'd bump into those, especially, I'm at Noosa at the moment. At Noosa, I'd bump into these people around CrossFit, around Noosa triathlon time. It'd be like, oh, the triathlon must be on because there's all these fit people. Or it would be in my martial arts circle. Most of the martial arts guys would be the big bellied karate dude, but then you'd always come across the fighter, the guy that was actually in the ring. And that guy was like, okay, you're a professional fighter. Like, I can see you. What's really interesting now is that you can walk down the street pretty much anywhere and you'll come across average run-of-the-mill people doing CrossFit who have got more physicality than both of those people.
Yeah.
And it's fairly common. Like, you actually don't bat an eyelid. I remember I'd walk down the mall 20 years ago. If I saw someone who was really fit, it'd be a head-turning moment. Like, I'd aspire to. I'd be like, holy shit, what do you do? And usually it would be like a bodybuilder or a triathlete, or one of the two.
Yeah.
These days, I'm walking past them all the time, and obviously I'm in a different headspace, but I'm looking at like, okay, you're the 3-year CrossFitter, you're the 5-year CrossFitter, you're the competitor. Like, I can categorize where they're at in the journey.
Because you would have seen so many of them.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. But what's also happened is I think we have normalized obesity in a way that's really shocking and scary. In that, the same thing 20 years ago, if I saw somebody who was morbidly obese, I would have this visceral reaction of like, oh man, like, you're really unhealthy. And I wonder, like, the coaching mind in me would be intrigued. Like, I wonder what you do, and I wonder how I could turn you around. And I'd just be, that person would be on my mind for quite a long time, because there'd be a contrast. Whereas now I see those people all the time, and I'm like, and I've become desensitized to it. It's like, okay,
it's commonplace.
More people with chronic illness, more pre-diabetics, more people doing that. So I think what's changed the most is that's just a dichotomy that wouldn't have been expected in my juvenile mind. I would have thought that as the community got fitter, it would have dragged everybody towards it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be that way. It seems to be the pathway that's driving chronic illness and the pathway that's driving fitness seem to be diverging paths.
Do you think there's hope for that to maybe continue to evolve? Like you said, something like CrossFit is something really paving the way, or are we just in a state of flow?
There should be, I don't even need the full disclosure. I'm clearly a CrossFit zealot, but I think one of the most lucid things recently that Greg Glassman has said, and he says a lot of them, so that's a big call, is the concept that the CrossFit affiliate is the lifeboat for chronic illness. Yeah, when you talk to him, he says he holds no hope for the health system. The health system is broken beyond repair, but he doesn't get depressed about it because he knows that there are affiliates everywhere and they're growing, and that the more and more people get themselves into an affiliate, the more their little community around them becomes fit. So I'm eternally hopeful because I think we have the answer. I think the problem is not an unsolvable problem. Whereas if you asked me this pre-CrossFit, I would have gone, I don't know what to do. Like, it's just, whereas now it's really obvious to me. It's like, yep, shut down soft drink for a start in the same way we've shut down smoking. Don't let our kids drink soft drink, just like we don't let our kids smoke. Hold the soda companies accountable for their marketing lies. Break that. Get corporate interests out of health science, which is what CrossFit's moving to do with CrossFit Health. Make sure that people tell the truth when they're doing research, and get the general community into a CrossFit box. So the solution's quite graceful. The problem is countering what is billions of dollars being spent on misinformation for commercial gain. And it's so broken. Like, at some point, the world will look back and there will be class actions against these soda companies.
And there'll be that point where they'll go, we could have maybe done something about this.
Yeah, but people will look back on our generation and say, how did you put up with kids drinking soft drink? And we'll go, I don't know, like, it just seemed too hard to change it. Which is similar. If we roll back to my parents' generation, there was a time where they would have said that about smoking. They would have said,
Yep.
hand on heart, they would have said, how could we stop people smoking? Everyone smokes. And I
Make it
think it's
more.
the same thing will happen. But yeah, I think the solution is there.
Mm.
And I'm pretty proud to be on the right side of that solution with who I work for.
Well, also, like you said, 38 plus, I guess you created 38 plus avenues for people to, at least within Brisbane and Greater Queensland or wherever.
There would be at least 500 in Brisbane now.
And it's happening. It's just getting them to go, I guess, is the big thing, isn't it?
Yep. The thing that's really disappointing for me in the discussion around what's happening at the moment with COVID is there is nothing anywhere in the media about health.
Mm.
Why aren't we talking about health?
Mm.
Why are we just talking, like, I understand it, the pandemic is huge and the response to the pandemic has to be primary, but there also needs to be a discussion around why do we have an overload of diabetes? Why do we have an overload of obesity? How difficult it is to deal with this situation when we have those conditions.
Mm.
These are preventable illnesses that are lifestyle dependent.
There's a question that I'll come to in our question about the COVID stuff that I didn't see the exact article, but I saw a snippet of it, and that's going to lead me to that. But before I do that, something that's on your bucket list, Mr. Swift.
No, I don't have much. A big thing that used to be on my bucket list was to move to the beach, and we did that after we sold the gym. So we're living at Noosa now, which is amazing.
Do you just wake up and go, how good is this?
I do. I actually do that because I work from home, and so we often hit the beach in the morning. We often hit the beach in the afternoon. We get to see the sunset. It's a remarkable place. So yeah, that was a big thing on my bucket list to get to the coast. I'd always want to do that. I don't really have anything around travel. Like I've done a lot of travel. I know we talked before. That's a common thing. Not for me. I think the main thing on my bucket list, if I'm being honest, is to get back to doing the things that I naturally did all the time as a kid growing up that I just stopped doing when I became busy and responsible. And those are things, like surfing is something I said I'd do every day. And these days I really can't be bothered, even if it's a good day, I'm like, oh, it's going to be cold. I've got all these sort of adult reasons for why I don't surf anymore.
That looks really hard.
It looks hard, yeah. I'll be gassed. So I think what's on my bucket list for this next phase of my life is now that in some regards, I've made my life really simple, which has been one of the big goals for Wendy and I over the last 5 years in particular, is to sort of get back to a life that we want to live. Is to probably do that now, is to go back to the things that I choose to do because I choose to do them, not things that I'm doing because they're for someone else in my spare time.
Do you reckon that's because, like we were saying earlier, there's the things that maybe you missed a little bit of the the important stuff with the kids when you were so busy being an adult? You've owned CrossFit boxes, you've traveled, you've done all this stuff. Again, you're a young 50. Do you want to sort of go back now and go, like you said, you want to be a kid again? So you go, I've got time to do this now. I'm not retired, I'm working, but now I'm sort of doing this stuff a little bit more on my terms. I've got time to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a really high responsibility person. I once got described as having a responsibility complex, taking on too much responsibility. That's a fairly apt description. So it's really important for me to feel like I've taken care of my responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's so pivotal at the moment is that I really feel like I've taken care of my responsibilities with the CrossFit community.
Yep.
So over the 15 years that I've been in the role of an affiliate owner, that had a set of responsibilities around it that took me away from a lot of other things, but it was okay because they were important. Now, as I close that particular chapter of my career, so I'm retired as an affiliate owner, I've got no intention of ever being another affiliate owner. Not because it's not amazing, but because that chapter in my life is over, just like I'll never have young kids again. And I'm okay with that as well.
Thank God.
Thank God. So now, I work for CrossFit HQ. I'm in an educational role. I'm still very much part of the community. I still consider myself as a coach. But now that I've moved on to that, what I've been able to do is move into an area where I don't have those things that I'm responsible for. And because I'm not responsible for them, I can now put my mind into other areas. Now, something else will probably pop up that causes me to trigger the responsibility complex. But at the moment, that's really why it is. So it's not a reliving my youth type thing. It's more to do with I now don't feel like I'm responsible to something, and I can find something else to focus on. And I'm extremely compulsive. So there's no doubt that. Sorry, I just had my phone ringing. I'm extremely compulsive, so I've got no doubt that if I do turn my focus onto something, it'll create responsibilities. But right now, my focus is on producing the best possible educational content I can for CrossFit HQ.
Would you call that a little bit of, like you said, you've been very much one of the formative people for CrossFit in Australia. Are you now, because you've done the CrossFit Masters course, you wrote that. That's a Masters coaching course.
Yep.
So are you, and there's other stuff you're in as well. Are you looking at, what would you say? Is it something to leave behind? Like you're creating
a legacy,
a little bit of a legacy?
Not
to say you're in the box anytime soon, but
no. I think that stuff. I think if you're doing purposeful work, which is a bit of a cliche, but I'll use it. So if you're doing work that has meaning, work that's important to you,
it has meaning to you.
Yep, as it definitely has meaning to me. My CrossFit work that I'm doing at the moment has enormous meaning. If you're doing work that has meaning, I think it's very natural that you'll leave a legacy.
Yep.
Without having to plan it or having to do anything. And what I know about the people that I respect and I aspire to be like is they're very busy producing things. They're not looking forward or backwards. They're actually just busy. And it's almost like there's a job to be done. I've got to do it. That has always sat very well with me. So when I'm at my happiest is when I've got things have to be done. I've got to do them well. I've got to do them now. So the driver for me at the moment is being challenged. Like I like being mentally challenged. And I find that things that used to be mentally perplexing 10 years ago are just not as challenging anymore, because, that's one of the nice things about growing old is you start to recognize patterns and shit's just not as confusing as it was when you were younger.
Generally.
That's true. So I think it is important for me to look back and say that was worth it. I can definitely say that about, if I look at my IT career, 25% of what I did, I can look back and say that was worth it.
Yeah.
I ran a little IT business with a partner. I loved it. And I look back on that part and go, that was amazing. Like to create a business and run it. And we had a great time and we sold it. That's cool. And that was the 25% that was worth it. If I look back on the other 75%, it's like, I could have skipped all of that shit.
That was crap.
Now, I can't say that with my HQ work and with CrossFit. So for the 10 years I worked for HQ, and for the 13 years I was an affiliate owner, I can look back on that and say, you know what, that was worth it. It was fucking hard most of the time.
Well, I mean, this is conversations you and I have had in the past. I mean, I think people, any small business is hard, but running a business like a sports orientated coaching kind of business like that, it is really hard work. But you probably, like me, have seen, it's incredibly rewarding. You see people come in as one, and then, however many months later, years later, you go, you just sit back and go, that's cool. And it's not a self-gratification, but you go, it's just great to see that person realize what they're truly capable of and what they can do.
Yeah, and look, I say the Masters course is an interesting thing, because one of the things I say to trainers at the end of that course when it was running was, when we train Masters, we change lives in profound ways, but not just theirs. The process of training somebody, you can't help but be changed. You can't help but be better when someone else that you're training becomes better. And I think that's what the underlying appeal is. So there's always an element of self, like no one's altruistic, there's always that element of self-reward that kicks in. But I have no doubt that what CrossFit has done for the world and what CrossFit Brisbane has done is something that I'm really proud of. And look, I can categorically tell you, one of my very, very strong belief systems is that the degree to which you're striving is directly linked to the degree that you have self-esteem. So self-esteem can only be developed through striving for something. And that is just such an important part of my ideology, and it's been an important part of my coaching ideology, that it's essential for humans to strive. We weren't designed to be cruisy. We weren't designed to be comfortable. We were designed to be growing and evolving and striving. And when I come across people that's struggling with mental health, or they're struggling with anxiety, or they're struggling with their purpose, I am yet to find a case where that person is being sufficiently challenged to strive to be something. And you can resolve it. And that's why CrossFit works so well as like this elixir, because people come in without knowing what their problem is. And the unifying thing is that everyone gets their ass handed to them and they have to try a bit harder.
Yes.
And then you're struggling with like, why can't I try harder? I want to try harder, but then I just bail on it. And you go through this microcosm every single workout of working out why you are just a pussy. And then you solve that a little bit and you go like, you actually feel amazingly good because you're a little bit less of a pussy and you manage to try harder. And so it's this
I think you remember you calling me a pussy at least on one occasion or something like that.
Sure. I remember clearly saying to you, come on, buddy, I thought you were a tough guy. You're showing me you're a pussy. I do clearly remember that. It was on a running workout. I remember, and I'd spent the whole time watching you run back in the building trying to work out what I was going to say to you to press your button.
It fucking worked. Not only do I hate running, I don't like being called a pussy.
It comes down to which do you hate more. My guess was you hated being called a pussy more than you hated running.
I'd run with a broken leg if it meant not getting called a pussy.
But it's important. You've got to be able to strive. You've got to be able to try hard.
We're going to move on in that note. Do you guys all get that? Matt Swift just called me a pussy. All right. Anyway, clearly we're due for another role soon. Actually,
it was modality specific.
He probably threw me through the wall these days. Now, current situation in the world, which is no surprise to you. I get back to, sorry, I was just leaning down, petting the dog, that leaves me alone. I get back to what I was talking about earlier. Now, there is an article that I haven't had the chance to read, but something along the lines, whether it was in the CrossFit Journal or it was from a CrossFit affiliate, stating a fact that generally speaking, the majority of people that are affected by COVID or have been affected by COVID and or died from COVID, they have all had one thing in common, be it they had chronic disease, they've had a particular health ailment, there's been some major health thing going on with them. Had they maybe have been a healthier person and taken more of an interest in their health and fitness, maybe they would have been in a different situation. Hang on, Reggie. Does that get back to our conversation earlier where you said we're not having this, we're talking about the end result? Are we not talking about maybe how to prevent this more moving forward?
Let's approach that a totally different way, because so the article you're referring to was released on the CrossFit Essentials page, and it was just talking about comorbidity and the impact that various conditions has on the mortality outcomes for COVID. Now, let's approach this a different way, because first of all, there will be, and I don't know what the stats are, but there will be a percentage of people with no comorbidity factors that fall victim to COVID and unfortunately die. And that's the case with any disease. We call those the struck by lightning people. So I always caution drawing strong, like really highlighting the link. So let me make both those things exist in the same space. Yes, I believe people should do everything in their power to have a lifestyle that minimizes chronic disease. And I also think it's beyond requiring any further evidence that chronic disease is a function of lifestyle. So it's within our control to a very large degree. Now, there's always going to be the people, the collection of people that have genetic misfortune, and no matter what their lifestyle, they will still fall to that particular disease. So those are the caveats. Now, the problem is, if you just focus on comorbidity, what you can very easily draw the wrong conclusion is that, well, it's their fault. And I think that's totally unhelpful, and it just takes it down the wrong path. So that's why I'm being very careful how to approach this. But let's approach it a different way. The reason for the lockdown is driven by flattening the curve, which is driven by not overwhelming the health system. So what would seem to me to be a really important question when something like this happens is, why is our health system already at capacity?
Before we even start.
That would be an important question, because we've got a strong health system. So why is our health system at capacity? And the reason our health system is at capacity is that we are already overwhelmed by lifestyle diseases, by chronic diseases that can be prevented through better lifestyle. Now, that's a really important question. And it's actually got nothing to do with whether your mortality is greater if you have one of these conditions or not, which there obviously seems to be a fair bit of evidence that's showing that once the disease gets hold, if you have one of these pre-existing conditions, they get exacerbated very dramatically. And it's basically, if you have heart disease, if you have type 2 diabetes, and if you've got kidney disease and you get COVID, those three conditions are going to get exacerbated dramatically. And some complication from those conditions that's probably going to kill you. And that's why it's skewed towards that group. So that's not specifically saying that COVID is more deadly for those people. It's saying that their illness becomes more deadly when they get COVID. So that's a subtle but important distinction.
Yeah.
But if you ask the question, why is the health system overwhelmed? And we were talking before about why is the US struggling with this more than somewhere like Australia. And there's obviously it's multivariate and there's lots of different reasons.
So many factors,
but one of the significant factors is the incidence of chronic disease is higher. So it would be a logical assumption that the load on the hospital system would already be greater than what it is in a country like Australia. So what should be the takeaway from this is, quite separate to COVID, there needs to be a focus on reducing the load on hospitals due to chronic disease. Because in reality, the medical system should be dealing with trauma. It should be dealing with genetic diseases, should be dealing with things that are not a function of lifestyle choices. So that's really where I think CrossFit's coming from with CrossFit Health, is that, so if you think about that as a scenario, I don't think that it's natural for somebody to want to be a doctor so they can prescribe medication to somebody who continues to get bigger and their diabetes continues to get worse while they continue to eat a high carbohydrate diet. I mean, surely that's not what drives your passion as a doctor. You know, your passion as a doctor is to treat somebody that's been dealt a hard blow with a genetic disorder, with a congenital disease, with has been in an accident, has had some infection, something like that. Surely that's what your passion is, to help. And the health system, unfortunately, has become overloaded with the opposite of that. It's become overloaded with chronic diseases that are preventable.
And I guess you would have seen it a lot. I mean, and God, I'm a culprit of it. We are a reactive people more than we are proactive these days. Like, you would have had the guy coming into CrossFit Brisbane, at the point where he's been told by his doctor, you lose weight or you are going to die, as opposed to, it'd be nice for you to, get a little bit fitter.
I'll just jump in there, because in my entire time coaching at CrossFit Brisbane, in the last 15 years in total, I have never had a doctor tell someone they needed to lose weight. What I've told them is they needed to exercise more. Those things are different. And I've certainly never had somebody told they need to change their diet that's come out of a medical situation. I have never had somebody turn up and say, hey, here's the reality of the situation. I'm overweight and I need to drastically lose weight and I need to change my diet to do it. What they actually come to me and say is, I've been put on high blood pressure medication, or I've been put on diabetes medication, and I've been told I need to exercise more. Do you see the difference between that? It's a surrogate. So what's happening, and this is where, you talk about passion. This is something I am very passionate about, is what has fucked up the world is we deal with surrogates. So not the real thing, we deal with a surrogate. And what that means is, I'll give you an example. Cholesterol is a surrogate.
Yep.
So if you've got high cholesterol, low cholesterol, that is a surrogate measure for whether you are overweight or whether you've got heart disease or whether you need to exercise. It's really irrelevant. What's irrelevant, what is relevant is you are 3 body sizes too big, and you're on the couch. That's a primary measure. Your primary measure is, what is your ability to walk up a set of stairs? What is your lean body mass? And is it healthy? Now, the reason that surrogates crop in is that surrogates can be medicated. Very easy to medicate surrogate measures. It's very hard to medicate primary measures. So I can't medicate getting you to understand that you need to eat more vegetables, you need to eat more protein, you need to drop your high refined carbs, and you need to get some fat into your diet. And that you need to every day do something that makes you puff and makes you strain. I can't medicate that. I've got to do behavioral change. And so the fundamental issue is that anything that requires behavioral change gets minimized, and anything that can be measured and therefore medicated gets amplified, which is why we find ourselves in a situation right now. So the fundamental issue with the comorbidity factors for COVID is that all of them require behavioral change.
Yeah.
And for behavioral change, it requires people to be honest and say, what you're eating is setting you up for, forget about COVID, it's setting you up for fucking everything. Like, you name it, you pick your poison. If you eat a high carb diet, if you drink, if you don't get off the couch, if you're carrying body weight, it doesn't matter what the disease that's going to kill you is, it's going to be one of them.
It will get you.
And it's probably going to be a lot of them. And so this is why it's really, that's my frustration, is that should be a discussion. A discussion at the moment should be, why is it that a pandemic hits and our medical system is overwhelmed? Why are we killing the economy to flatten the curve? The reason we're doing it is we don't want to overwhelm the medical system, which is a great reason. But that's not the question. The question is, why are we in this situation in the first place?
That's right.
And how do we get corporate interests out of health?
And that's the thing, and mate, it's that you've hit the nail on the head, because it's, again, like I said, we're not trying to be general, and we're not trying to say everyone who has got COVID has those things. But if we just maybe, I think it's something that I've looked at recently, is just how healthy really are we, and how healthy is our family, that we, are doing our best to maybe just do our little bit to be better. Like you said, we're all ducking to that pill. We're talking about the vaccine, and you bring up a really good point. It didn't take that long for us to saturate our health system in the first place. So maybe do you think...
Let me give you a recent example. This is where I think it's broken. So this is a recent example from my coaching. I had somebody come to me who had been put on medication to lower his blood pressure and to lower his cholesterol. Had been given a whole lot of advice around what he should be doing to correct those things. And no one had spoken to him about the fact he was fat. So I'm being blunt as I am as a coach. I'm saying, buddy, that's not your first problem. Like your first problem is that you're overweight. And so the first problem is that your pant size is 3 times the size it used to be. Like, do you remember when it used to be this? And that's the actual problem. Like, the problem is the person standing in front of me is wearing a 36 pant and should be wearing probably a 30. Now, there's no doubt blood pressure is a problem. But if you fix that first problem, if you take him from 36 to a 30, you know what? Blood pressure is not going to be a problem anymore. It's going to resolve itself. That's the craziness that we find ourselves in, is that when we have a health system that's overloaded, the questions are not being asked. The question that should be, like the pressure that should be put back on our politicians is, why isn't diabetes being dealt with? So why are we reliant upon soda taxes and unable to shut down commercial interests in research when those things directly lead to chronic illness?
Is it just too hard? Is it too hard to basically, like you said, to give those hard-edged answers? Well, it's not your medication, it's not this, it's not that. You're too fat. You're overweight. You're obese. Is it easier for us as a society to make a pill than actually say to them?
For the medicos, I think it's a I feel for doctors, because they work in a clinical practice. They get to see people for 10 minutes. They're overloaded, they're overworked, and they're working within a medical framework that's based on research, and they're doing their best within the within the standard of practice that they're given. The issue is further up the chain. The standard of practice is corrupted by research that is biased towards commercial interests. So they're in good faith operating on a standard of practice that's been derived around medical research. But if you look at commercial interests in medical research, that's where the problem lies. There's no truth in science anymore. So to answer your question, if the battle that we have, and when I say we, I mean as a trainer, the battle that I feel, the thing that I feel is really difficult, is I can't tell somebody what to eat because there's restrictions on that, legal restrictions. So I can't tell you that I think for your next meal, in order to start you on the path of losing weight, I think you should put some protein on your plate. Let's make it, lean chicken, and let's add colorful plate of vegetables. Let's make that broccoli. Let's make it some Brussels sprouts. Let's put some carrots on there. Let's put a little bit of rice on there to give you some carbs that are going to give you some energy, and let's give you some olive oil over the top of it to give you some fat. Now, if I do that, I'm operating well outside my scope of practice, and I can be in trouble for that. Now, what I can do is I can tell you to go and research what you should be eating, that's complicated and it's long. You're not going to do that if you're already struggling to eat the right thing. Now, here's the problem.
There's a different opinion.
Let me give you an example of how this is so screwed up. So if I approach the local school and say, hey, I really noticed that across the board, these kids are carrying too much weight and they're sedentary. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to run a program where I just come in and I show them how to make a good breakfast. And I show them how to make a good lunch. I show them how to make a good dinner. I'll do it on my own time. I'll do it for free. I'll show you what I'm going to do beforehand, and we'll set them homework and you can make it part of their program. I will be told I cannot do that. I cannot do that because it's outside my scope of practice, and there'll be all sorts of rules and I'll get shut down. However, if I approach the school and say, I have a Coke machine, and if I put the Coke machine outside the tuck shop, your tuck shop is going to get a percentage of all the money that it makes, that'll get a tick. Now, what should happen is, you're a dad, you should be outraged at that. Like, you should actually be outraged. You should be walking into the school, you should be looking at Coke machines and going, what is happening? Or Coke being served in the tuck shop. You should be outraged. You should be on the PNC. You should be pushing back on that. Now, you're a motivated individual. Imagine what the demotivated individual responds to that like. And then take it one step further, the person that actually thinks Coke's not that bad anyway.
One might hurt.
Yeah, and so the crazy thing is that kids can walk to school drinking Three Mothers. It's drinking these sort of loaded with caffeine and sugar. The burden of the standard that is set for me as a trainer to improve people's health is significantly higher than the standard that is set for a commercial entity to impact someone's health. So that means I have to jump through a whole lot more hoops to prove to a doctor that my athlete who turns up who's overweight needs to eat meat, vegetables, nuts, seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar. and they need to do high intensity exercise, the standard is so much higher that I have to jump over to prove that to the doctor than it is for the doctor to say, it's okay if you have a soft drink a day. That's really not the factor, as long as you take your medication.
Mm.
And that's a huge problem, because it's not the same set of rules.
And without being pessimistic, I guess, moving out of COVID and moving forward, however many years or even generations, it may be something that we just, not to give up, but we can do our bit. And if we change one, it's, if we change a group of people's belief, but it's a very hard task to change that overall belief, isn't it?
It's a hard task to remove money out of research.
That's right.
Because livelihoods are affected on it.
Mm.
There's I think the good thing, what's the good thing out of all of this?
Yes.
Good thing out of all of this is I think it has, across the scale, made people focus that health issues are real.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people that have been sort of bumping along asleep, thinking that shit never happens to them, it's been a big wake-up call that, like, holy shit, there are things that can happen. If you don't have good infection control, if you don't take hygiene seriously, if you don't, basic stuff that used to be good manners, you don't cover your mouth when you cough, don't wash your hands off before you eat. I like seeing those things now being elevated as just good common sense.
Mm.
The second thing that's happened that I think is amazing is a whole lot of people seem to be away from devices, out in the parks, walking with their families.
So do you see that and you get this big smile on your face?
Absolutely. I love it.
Finally.
I love it. And I don't know how much of this is the place that we've just moved into, but, I'm seeing kids in the street playing together, families out walking. It's like this, as soon as their freedom got taken away, it created a thirst for freedom. And I think that is an amazing thing, because you get complacent about it. You get so entitled and just think that the way the world is the way the world is. And so, if nothing else, having a restriction placed on the community, I think, has made the community value the freedoms that we have. And that's a remarkable thing.
We live, like where we live now is a nice quiet area. And you see there's a cul-de-sac that I'll walk down to the park with the girls where I'm doing PTs at the moment. It's kind of like the 50s. There's bikes out.
Yeah, it's great.
The girls ride their skateboards down. It's just, it is something that, and again, I will say you were one person who I actually did think of a couple of weeks ago. And I went, people like you would be going, I hope this continues in some way, or is it not it must be a great hope that you get people, like you said, like we're all talking about, like CrossFit gyms reopening.
Yep.
Are they going to get, like, when my gym reopens, will we get this surge of people that, like you said, have had maybe this little wake up call and they go, you know what, I need to take that care of myself?
I think one of the things that's nice, like when we talk about just the general growth of CrossFit and fitness in general, fitness businesses, one of the things that I've said to a couple of affiliate owners now is that there is a silver lining to this, as difficult as it is. And the silver lining is, when things are just chugging along, it's kind of chaos theory. You've got to keep putting energy into your gym for people to keep feeling like you're doing the same thing. Like, you know this, I know this. Anyone that's run a fitness business knows that what you did yesterday is not enough. You've got to do what you did yesterday and a bit more, just for people to love you the same as they loved you yesterday.
Yeah.
It's this sort of funny thing. You keep putting energy into it. Now, what happens over time is, the longer people have been there, the more they take it for granted. And they just think it's going to, it's just the way it is. So what I think is a great silver lining at the moment for business owners, as hard as everything is that when things kick back up, it has caused their consumers to recognize how much they value it. So, if I know for my local coffee shop, as soon as I couldn't go there, I'm like, I love that coffee shop. And I want it to survive, I want it to do well. You know what I'm talking about? And I think that there's the gym community, hopefully, will take pause and recognize that, hang on, this gym is more than just a service. It means something to me. It's part of my life, and it's a community, and I miss my community and I want it to live. And hopefully when it restarts, they will restart a little bit humbler, because one of the things that has definitely changed in the CrossFit community from when I started is that I think humility was a big part of it in the beginning. And as things became more commercialized, I do see a lack of humility, like an entitlement. And this might be a good reset for the community to recognize that, hey, gyms can go away, and you do need to support them like you support your local surf club.
That was a question that I was going to ask you earlier, and I chose to leave it. It was on that same sort of thing. Like, will it get people to maybe come back? And like, I love CrossFit. I always have. I've always had a lot of time for it. It's helped me. But will it make people, like you said, realize this is what I'm really doing CrossFit for? I'm doing it for
you've
this.
nailed it.
I'm not doing it for the new set of nanos, or
Yep.
I'm not doing it for likes on the gram.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a big cultural topic that doesn't get discussed. And when we talk about the original group of CrossFitters, what identifies them for me was that they were connected to a broad and inclusive fitness. That's the little slogan we talk about, broad and inclusive fitness. What we're really talking about is being able to do shit really well that you're not expecting to have to do. Now, that's really high on my list of values. I like that about CrossFit. I like that no matter what you throw at me physically, I'm going to have a pretty good crack at it because of my CrossFit. And that's why I do it. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that as the sport of CrossFit gained in growth, and as people started to look through the lens of CrossFit as a sporting activity, a lot of that was lost. And it wasn't lost by CrossFit, it was lost by the participant not seeking it. And so I know a whole heap of people that don't think that health is a part of CrossFit. Now, what I'm hoping this has caused as a reset of mentality is a realization, no, there's actually huge benefits to being healthy and to being fit. And those benefits require you as an individual to seek them. Yeah. Like, you have to seek fitness, and you have to seek health beyond what your box just expects of you. And then when you do that, you become a fitter individual. Now, we see this divide really clearly because I identify as a garage CrossFitter. I love my garage. It's the first thing I did as soon as I bought this house is we set up the shed. It's well equipped. It's as equipped as most affiliates.
Wendy was looking in the house. You looked in the shed.
That was exactly what happened. That is literally what happened. I looked at the shed and I said, you know what? I do not care. The house is yours. This is the shed that I've been looking for. And so that was huge. So we've got the shed that is a garage gym. And this is the divide between what I call a garage CrossFitter and an affiliate CrossFitter. And as hard as we try as an affiliate manager or affiliate coach, you just really can't get that self-sufficiency, that self-driven desire. So in the original CrossFit community, we had martial artists, we had surfers, we had rock climbers, we had adventure racers, although it wasn't called that at the time. Now, what unifies all of that type of person is they're very individualistic and they're very solo. It's like, I'm doing this thing and I better be prepared for it. Fighters are a classic example. 16 weeks, I'm going to get my head punched in, so I'm driven to work. So you don't see fighters trying to game the workout to get a better score because they know when they step in the ring, every bit of a fitness they've accumulated is going to help them win. And so with a sports CrossFitter, they're gaming it all the time. If I pace this, I'll get a better score, I'll get more points. They're not thinking through the lens of their own capacity. Whereas the garage CrossFitter, I think, has always been connected to their own personal capacity. It's a nuanced point, but it's really important. And I'm hoping that we now have more that are connected to their own personal capacity.
I distinctly remember, again, a brief that you gave once about it was in an AMRAP, and it was a 5-rounder. It was, what was it? It was something, he goes, you said, if you get a better time in the 5th round than you did in the 3rd round or the 2nd round, it means one of two things. It means A, you're incredibly fit, or B, you fucking gamed it. And it's more than likely B.
That was Fight Gone Bad. So it was the 5-round, the championship version of Fight Gone Bad. And what that talks to is who are you doing it for in the first place?
That's right. Well, you said about someone going in a ring. When a guy steps in a ring, the opponent doesn't give a shit what his Fran time is.
They do not care. But if that person has done Fran to the best of their ability, then his opponent will care.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you can make your opponent care about it if your fitness is real.
Yeah.
But if your fitness is just a number on a board, that's not going to help you and it's not going to scare them.
No one gives a shit.
So that's something that I think is an artifact of what I call commercialized CrossFit.
Mm.
And it's very different to the self-sufficiency that used to be part of, what I'd call traditional CrossFit, where people would read the journal and they'd seek out information. And there was a weird bunch of people in those early days, like it was a melting pot of kettlebell people.
It was all types.
There was the weird ultra runners that used to wear the Vibram 5 fingers on their feet. There was gymnasts. There was this collection of people, but what was really clear was that they were self-directed. They were doing weird shit because it was their psyche. I don't see much of that anymore.
But it was like we found it. I mean, I know I found it. I can't. I mean, I remember, and I don't even know how I got there, but I remember just stumbling across the old school CrossFit.com website, and I just saw it. Oh, okay, and then I started watching a little bit, and I remember, seeing some of the real old school stuff, and then I went. It was again that accumulation of people, like you said, already playing sports, already doing sports, going, I do this will make what I already, and I've always said this, I do CrossFit, it makes what I already do better.
Better, yeah. You know who I use as the ultimate example is Doug Armstrong.
Mm.
My all-time favorite CrossFitter. And the reason I love Doug is, in this context, is Doug's known for giving it to himself. You put him in any workout, he is going to give it to himself. If you put him in a workout and tell him someone's going to beat him, he will find a gear that you didn't even think he had. I've seen him do things, I've seen him do a 3-round version of Helen. 3-round version of Jackie. That's right, a 3-round version of Jackie. And he tore his hand on the first set of pull-ups in the first round and didn't say anything and completed the workout in a cracking time, and then showed me his hands. And I asked him, when did you do that? He's like, first rep of the first pull-ups. So it's just a different, he's unhinged. There's a different mentality around that guy. But what I particularly respect about Doug is, if you roll him into an affiliate and put him in a workout and brief the workout and give him all the rules, he will try his heart out and he'll try to get the best score on the board, and he'll kill himself doing it. But here's the interesting thing, is if I take that dude to a park and I write the workout out and don't tell him anything about it, and there's no scoreboard and there's no clock, he will kill himself.
You'll work just as hard.
Because what he's seeking is, how well can I do this? He's curious by his ability, and he's curious by how hard can he work. That thing is a very valuable trait. And I certainly aspire to it. I can't do it the way that he does it, but it's a very valuable trait. And I think that's what was at the heart of the original CrossFit generation, that unified everybody, no matter how diverse they were.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, we lost that, and it became, is this good enough for you to rate me? Not always, but there's definitely that undercurrent.
No, I've definitely seen that evolution. And again,
and it's probably not just CrossFit. It's probably martial arts and surfing and.
I mean, you have a look at jiu-jitsu these days. There is definitely a very similar style movement in competitive jiu-jitsu these days. I think, maybe competitive sport in general has moved a little bit as a whole towards that stuff.
Or maybe it's just so accessible now to the general population that it's the effect of the general population. It's not the fact that the sport has become the martial arts become a competitive sport. It's that when you bring the bell curve of the population into something,
exactly,
it gets the attitudes of the bell curve of the population.
It's right there.
Yeah,
we're able to do things now getting done in the States. We're able to do them the following day. We're able to. Yeah. So I think CrossFit's definitely not alone in that regard. But yeah, I think how you're using that take about keeping it real. It's definitely something that we need to look at and maybe strive for. Be the Hicks and Gracie of CrossFit.
Yeah, the take for me with COVID is that COVID's probably the first real thing that's happened to this generation.
Yep.
And it is, it's real. It's real. Even if you're not personally affected by it. And, I think we're very lucky here because of the steps that have been taken, the fact we're an island, things we talked about earlier. We're not really affected by it to anywhere near the same degree as many other countries, but we are economically. And there is a disruption to lifestyle. So even being as far away from it as possible, the effects are huge. And I can't imagine what it's doing culturally to epicenters, where it's not only, where you're actually getting loss of life and getting these sort of, I can't fathom living somewhere where 1,000 people a day are dying. That just is beyond, it's
Yeah.
beyond my concept.
It's crazy. And I mean, do you, I mean, people, like you said, you know, and again, we've had a talk about it previously, but probably the last thing, people who are wanting to, you know, like you said, you know, it's been 2 months now in Australia's sense. When's the gym opening up? When are we going back? Let's do this. Are you wanting, like I am, and just saying, can you just be patient? If you're if you're a lifetime fitness person, another month's not going to kill you. Like you said, plenty of other shit you can do.
Yeah. I mean, some of that is, I've got to be careful because I'm very prejudiced. I'm such an introvert that, which is not something that I think a lot of people in the community realize, that peg me as an extrovert because of my job and because of what I do. But I'm actually really introverted and quite shy. And so my day, I work from home. I do my thing. I'm very much, you know, if I'm not reading, I'm training, and I don't really socialize. And all of my activities are things that I do with my wife. And it's actually quite interesting, because if it wasn't for the general tragedy and the fear, and, you know, like I get incredibly affected reading about it and just the tragedy of what's going on. But if I push that to the side, this is actually the ideal life for me. Like it's brilliant. It's quiet.
I'm a bit the same. Every time we go out now, I have to go somewhere. I'm like, do we really have to go?
I have to go.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, but so what I was saying is that it's easy for me to say to people, be patient, because I'm quite happy training in my garage and being a hermit. I'd imagine if you are a social person, if you're extroverted, if you're a group person, you know, I imagine there's so many people that are just, their mental health is threatened by being isolated. That's not me. You know, my mental health gets threatened by being in a group of people. So I'm very lucky in that regard. And I really like my wife, you know, so.
Oh, thank God for that.
I'd hate to be, you see that meme that was kicking around about, okay, you've got two options. Option one, you can stay at home with your family. Option two, I'll take option two.
Whatever it is. Yeah, I saw that and I sent that to Helen. I didn't get a response. Mr. Swift, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Like you said, we could easily go for so much longer, but I do miss our little post-workout chats and motivation speeches as mid workout as you
rambles that I used to have.
I think you are maybe one of those guys that I think when people talk, people need to listen, and I love that in you, and that was why you were one of the first people I chose when it came to putting a list together, and I'm glad we finally connected. So if people did want to ever get in touch with you, is there a way to do that would be the best way to do that?
Probably just through Instagram.
Yeah.
So matt.swift, pretty straightforward. Matt.swift is my handle. Yeah, I don't have a gym anymore. I don't have a website anymore.
You can't say it's not active, but I saw him do a very impressive slip onto his butt, not hook gripping a bar the other day. And then there was another one where you are.
You know what? That was. I've lifted a lot. I've done a lot of lifting, and it's very, very rare for me to not know something is going to happen. And that one caught me totally off guard.
What about when you had to chase that same bar out the door when it started to roll away?
Well, I thought it was going to hit my car. What you couldn't see is my car was parked just outside the door, and it's on a slope. So
it was
I landed on my ass. I didn't know what had happened, but I looked up and I'm starting to complain. I looked up and saw the bar rolling towards my car, and I had this like, oh shit.
You're like those guys that fall over and slip and can't get up quick enough, hoping that
nobody saw that. Yeah. I've done a bit of that in my life, but yeah, that was actually shocking. You know, what's interesting about that is that on the weightlifting course, I always talk to people about how weightlifting is a jump, but also how it's a jump backwards. It's not a vertical jump. You're actually jumping backwards as hard as you can. And I think that video proved it.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A. Yeah.
Guys, thank you for listening, everyone that's tuned into this one. There are other COVID conversations. You can just go to the Kyl Reber YouTube channel, spelled Kyl. Yes, there's no E. Yes, that's how my name is definitely spelled on my birth certificate. It's true. You can also go to the kylreber.com.au website. You can go to Kyl Reber on Instagram, Facebook. It's very easy to find. As far as I know, I'm the only person in the world whose name is spelled Kyl with no E on the end. That's one good thing that's come out of that. Matt Swift, thank you. It is always a pleasure. I appreciate your time. And maybe one day we'll come back and we'll do the 3-hour version.
Yep, and I look forward to being back on the mat and having your knee firmly in my sternum at some point.
I made a point of not mentioning the knee ride thing because I knew.
No, it was a formative part of my jiu-jitsu experience, going like, holy shit, that's pressure. I don't think I'd ever experienced pressure up until that point. I just thought it was all sneaky techniques.
You had me at hello, Swifty. You had me at hello. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome, my friend.
See you later.